Under Trump, you guys have two outcomes that an election can be. Either we win or they cheated.
The sense in which I think the election in 2020 was rigged, I'm sorry. This is where I'm probably going to lose you here. But here's
that happened about 8 minutes ago. You went too far, and you should own it like you did childless cat ladies.
I want to hop into a few hilarious clips of JD Vance on Bill Maher getting pretty quickly cornered on his election denial BS and a few other clips of MAGA lies with him as well. So leave us a like on the video. It helps us out a ton. We're aiming for 50 by the end of the day. Subscribe and comment for the algorithm as well. And we can get straight down to the breakdown.
Under Trump, you guys have two outcomes that an election can be. Either we win or they cheated. That shit has to stop. And the person who... means the person who has to stop it would be you or Marco. Can you tell me you will do that? Will you bring us back to the middle, at least on that, where we concede elections, where it's not either one of those two options?
Okay, Bill, so this is where I'm probably going to lose you here. But here's...
that happened about 8 minutes ago.
Look, I don't think that we should not concede elections, but I don't think that's what's going on. I think that if you go back to the president's core argument, he was making an argument about problems that existed in 2020. And here's the problem that I'm most focused on. The president and I have talked a lot about this, and I think we share a perspective here, but set to the side the stuff that really gets you and your audience very angry about whether the count was legitimate in Georgia or Pennsylvania or any of these other states.
Except we can't do that. We're not putting it aside. JD might have realized how much of a losing argument it is, as it's been pretty thoroughly disproven. So he's going to try to find a way to intellectualize the lie, which we will get into in the next clip. But Donald Trump is still putting these same old lies out, still claiming proof will be released any moment, 6 years after this happened, when he said the evidence would be out in no time. Now, after 60 court cases found no fraud, multiple recounts, after his own private investigators found literally no fraud, his attorney general, national security, intelligence director, hell, his own family members were telling him there was no evidence of fraud, and he still sent a violent mob to the Capitol to pressure Mike Pence to do fraud. JD Vance, now who pretends election security is paramount, fraud is unforgivable, can't even levy a critique against that. It's pitiful.
Is it true that large technology companies, some of whom have financial interests that exist outside the United States of America, were they censoring information in the run-up to an election? And set to the side the stuff, again, the Georgia stuff, but
that was litigated. Dominion, the Fox News paid us.
Bill, I'm trying to make the more middle ground argument here. The biggest criticism I had of the 2020 election is that you had technology companies that were quite literally censoring negative information about the left and promoting negative information about the right. So in a fundamental sense, like if the First Amendment says that we have a free and open debate and then the American people judge based on that free and open debate, the sense in which I think the election in 2020 was rigged, I'm sorry, is that you had technology companies that were putting their thumb on the scale in a way that completely obliterated the real open exchange of ideas. Well, now, by the way, it didn't happen in 2024, but it happened in 2020 and it was a problem.
Okay, let's both debunk the lie he's telling and then use the logic against him, because first he's talking about the Hunter Biden laptop story largely. Facebook and Twitter did censor one article for 24 hours because there was no evidence to support it, and the source of it was a literal Russian agent. Again, only the New York Post article was censored. Other articles were allowed to be shared, and that one was because it made broad claims as if they were fact without substantiating them, and then after 24 hours, it was allowed too. And the COVID misinformation was censored, which I'll die on a hill that censoring medical misinformation in the middle of a pandemic is required. Like, it should be required. There's no evidence that either of these stories would have swayed the election. The only people in polling who cared about Hunter's laptop were Republicans who were already voting for Trump. But in 2024, right-wing media did run Biden dementia, which was objectively false. They did run lies like they're eating the cats and dogs and Democrats want open borders and a long slew of lies. So the logic of big tech putting their thumb on the scale of an election could actually apply to 2024 in a lot more ways than it could in 2020, in ways that are substantiated. I mean, Biden had to drop out of the election because of the pressure mounting on him because of this right-wing narrative that was running in their media. Nothing of the sort happened to Republicans in 2020.
I'm actually fascinated by Nixon as a character in history. I think that his historical legacy is enjoying a bit of a renaissance, but I think deservedly so. As I joked with Robert backstage, if Watergate happened tomorrow, it would be like a 12-hour news story. Like, the idea that it would have taken down a presidency is crazy. And by the way, if you look at the story of how the deep state took down Richard Nixon, it's not all that different from what the same groups of people, the same institutions tried to do to Donald Trump in the first Trump administration. There is a parallel.
On a personal level, it's weird that these people would be glorifying Nixon. But before we get into that, let's just address the point. Because in Watergate, Nixon was running for re-election and he had a committee, the Committee for Re-electing the President. Creep. 5 men from that committee were arrested breaking into the DNC. They tried planting bugging devices, stealing files, and more. They also later find out like he paid them out of a White House slush fund, tasked the IRS to probe Democrats. But Nixon won that election in a landslide. McGovern was a terrible candidate. But during these people's trials, a larger conspiracy was suspected. One thing led to another, and the Supreme Court ordered the release of White House tapes, without a doubt proved that Nixon conspired, paid the staffers, and more. And he resigned because, of course, there was still dignity in being president. His party wasn't fond. And because like when Ford pardoned him, that was unpopular. People think that's a big reason Ford didn't win re-election, because it made him unpopular within his own party. But like, so now comparing yourself to Nixon is just weird, because it's like you're admitting corruption, if anything, but now you're whitewashing. It's all odd. But Nixon is also the guy who ran the most racist campaign of all time. Like, he is the one who did the Southern strategy, capitalizing off racial animus and anger of white Southern conservatives after the Civil Rights Act was passed. This is something that then led to Reagan doing it, Big Bush doing it, Kemp, and I forget who ran in 92. Oh, of course, Big Bush again, I'm silly. But yeah, it became like this pinnacle of the Republican platform for decades to follow.
You went too far, and you should own it like you did childless cat ladies.
Well, okay. So here's the basic problem with that bill is you cannot do any deportations without law enforcement. And you can't do a law enforcement operation like that without having some situations that don't look good when they're recorded like that. I mean, let me give you like just one obvious example. Let's just set aside the immigration element of this, okay? If you take a guy who's committed murder and you go in and arrest that guy, sometimes that person's going to resist arrest. Sometimes if you take a video of it and it's out of context and you don't appreciate why that person is being arrested in the first place, it looks pretty icky if you take that out of context video clip. And what I worry about is when people say you can't ever do immigration enforcement if it produces a bad video clip, what they're really saying is you can't ever actually do immigration enforcement. We had 12 million people come into the country, into the interior over the last 4 years, or I should say from 2021 to 2025. And we were elected with a mandate to get some of those people out of the United States of America.
No, it means they want you to reform immigration enforcement. Also, you have to love how he's like, it's a murderer resisting, and clips like that are bad but necessary. And meanwhile, the left is talking more about ICE murdering 3 Americans and Vance and Noam rushing to their podiums to slander the victims and then reinstating the ICE officer, or them tear gassing a baby, 40 illegal chokeholds. We're talking about the deadliest period in ICE detention history with dozens of people dying. We're talking about deporting Abrego Garcia illegally, acting like you can't get him back until you were forced to do so, and then showing you can easily. This is the problem with MAGA, though. We all agree on something like arresting murderers. Well, they agree when it's brown people. They would probably defend Donald Trump for it, just like they defend him for rape or 88 other felonies. Let's just be honest about that. But where we disagree is on how this affects children, citizens, and the degree of violence and inhumanity that they're afflicting on real people, the overwhelming amount of which have no criminal records, which wouldn't justify this sort of behavior, wasting taxpayer dollars to do so, hurting our economy to do so. So there's also like should we be doing it to the level that they are? And I think a lot of Americans Americans, given that regularly in polling, around 80% of Americans think that undocumented nonviolent immigrants with no criminal history should be given a pathway to citizenship or residency. They talk about 80-20 issues. There's one. It seems like that argument only matters when they're trying to disenfranchise voters, I guess.